Welcome. Okay, so I just need a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing an employee discipline matter. Eric and Scott, thank you. All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. We're off to executive session. Thank you. I need a motion to open up our public session as we're returning from executive session. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Carrie. All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Or 6-0. And now I may ask our student representative to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. We will start off with administrator remarks. Dr. Dash.
All right, good evening. Thank you. Our Brewster High School 2023 group met this morning to take stock of where we are in the process of revisioning Brewster High School. We implemented some new courses and some initiatives this year, and we now want to gather some information to evaluate the effectiveness of those changes. So we started by brainstorming a list of information that we want to know and discuss some of the data that we already have and already collect as a way of informing our next steps. So the high school team and I will assemble that data and share it back with our 2023 group in January with the goal of having a discussion about what additional feedback and data we need. We also discussed the need to make sure we incorporate more student voice in the decision-making process through various means. So we look forward to moving forward with this group for the continual betterment of Brewster High School. And my last comment has to do with a mindfulness session that was run yesterday with our new educators. So I'd like to thank Mrs. Rebecca Archer, who's a high school health teacher. She led a session on mindfulness with all of our probationary teachers. So there were a little over 50 teachers that were in attendance yesterday afternoon at Brewster High School ILC. Mrs. Archer shared some strategies and led our newer educators through some mindfulness exercises, which are important all times of year, but especially around the holidays. The hope is that the teachers will implement some components of mindfulness into their professional practice. So I'd just like to thank Rebecca for her willingness to share her expertise as she does each year. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Harrington?
Hey, good evening. So my brief report for this evening includes the long-awaited welcome of Dr. Master Chief Michael Campbell, our new ROTC instructor, who formally began at Brewster High School last week. Master Chief recently retired from the Navy and holds a doctorate in educational leadership. Much thanks to Commander Earl Waidelick for his efforts to maintain a strong and robust ROTC program while we were slightly understaffed this fall. A special thanks to him for his good work in helping to secure Master Chief, along with our high school principal, Ms. Horler. Also this evening, we will be recommending for appointment our new Assistant Supervisor of Transportation to the Brewster community. I'll share some brief background later in the agenda, but again would like to acknowledge our Director of Transportation, Mary Smith, and our SEIU representatives, including President Artie Campbell, for their participation in the interview process. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson?
Good evening. Just two quick public service announcements. So we continue to hold our budget workshops, our Budget 101 workshops, as a precursor for the 2021 budget season. Our next budget workshop is next Tuesday night, December 17th at 6:30 in the ILC at Brewster High School, so please come out. Also on Tuesday the 17th is another district-wide lockdown drill that we'll be performing with the Putnam County Sheriff's Department. So I just want to make everyone aware of that. That's our second test of our lockdown district-wide, which is new to this year. And that concludes my comments for this evening.
Thank you. Dr. Penrose?
Thank you. Our administrative team is looking forward to the joint administrative and Board of Education retreat next week, and we appreciate keeping the lines of communication open. So thank you to all the administrators in the district. Also tonight we have two presentations that will continue and be our final highlights of district-wide goals. Tonight we have Dr. Frank Zimmerman from JFK, the principal, that will be sharing JFK's goals this evening. And then also after that we have Mrs. Elizabeth Kennedy, the Director of Pupil Personnel Services, and her team will be giving the goals for their department as well. And on behalf of our administrative team and all the staff and the school community, we want to wish the board a wonderful holiday and Happy New Year.
Thank you. For myself, it's the same thing, just happy holidays and happy New Year to everyone, so we don't, before then, officially formally this way. We'll still be in the schools, attending different events, and different public meetings. So just extend that to everyone, and see you all in the new year. Okay, so we move on now to our student representative.
Thank you. This Thursday and Friday will be a girls' basketball home tournament. Next Monday at 7 p.m. in the high school PAC is the all-ensemble holiday concert. Next week during school is the volleyball tournament, which is always a super exciting time of year for all students. And ninth period on Thursday the 19th will be a student team versus a teacher team, which should be super fun for everyone except maybe the teachers on the team. What I'm personally most looking forward to is this Friday is the Day of Community, where over 100 high school students will be coming down to CV Star and JFK to run community-related activities, and that should be super exciting. So happy holidays.
Thank you. Okay, we now move on to presentations, recognition, discussion, and first up is JFK Elementary School and Pupil Personnel Services Department, Coles, Frank Samperlin, and Elizabeth Payne.
Before Aaron goes, though, I want to thank him and the high school students for doing a wonderful job of organizing the Day of Community. They stepped up over a number of years to really put this event together. And Aaron and his team have really stepped up this year about making it a day of community instead of calling it a day of service and expanding upon everything. So thank you and kudos to the VHS students. Thank you very much. Thank you for the board for this opportunity to just give you a flavor of what's been happening at JFK over the last 4 months. First, before I begin, I just would like to thank a few people. Obviously, Mr. Conroy's taken leave of absence, but during this time, several people stepped up and really been very important in making sure things are flowing. I'd like to thank our main office team, Susan Dandin, Barbara Gugliero, and Joanne Matthews for just making sure everything is intact. Paul Taylor, our custodial lead, he's picked up a lot of the safety pieces that Mr. Conroy has been working on over the years. Our support team, Ruth Muller, Ashley Cunningham, Elena Bellucci, and Brian Supa, for really picking up a lot of the student issues and getting involved in the counseling pieces. You'd be surprised how great a counselor Brian Supa is as a sheriff and getting in there and working with families and really teaching children about positive behaviors in a really upbeat way. And I'd like to thank our interim assistant principal, Nadine McDermott, for coming in and really hitting the ground running. Nadine and I have worked in different, our paths have almost paralleled. When she was in Briarcliff, we knew a lot of common people. So it's not like just having a person come in filling in. As a former assistant principal, she's a colleague. She's also been like a consultant for us too, in helping us to find ways to improve our systems at JFK. So our first goal this year is, one of the questions I think the board has been asking is, how does that thing over there, the profile of the graduate, and all of these pieces and components of the strategic coherence plan actually impact the classroom? So last year, what we did was we started talking about how those 5 components, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, civic responsibility, adaptability, and perseverance would be designed into lessons in the classroom. We had a lot of conversations, faculty meetings, one-on-one conversations during our pre-observation conferences with teachers on how that would happen. So this year, I've given the teachers 2 guiding questions. What is your explicit instructional purposeful learning point, and what are you doing to assess students using a rubric that teachers created? I'm going to walk you through the process. So this is an example of a real objective from a lesson this year in 1st grade. And the teacher and I worked in the pre-observation conference. Students will be able to demonstrate their ability in critical thinking and effective communication by analyzing, that's the critical thinking piece, and then explaining, that's the communication piece. And they were doing fact families with numbers, mathematics and first grade. So the first, I'll take one component, critical thinking. That's broken up into 5 components. Interpreting, analysis, reasoning, problem solving, metacognition, and application. And as you saw, we were looking at analysis and interpretation. So the teacher and I looked at this line, this part of the rubric, and then I went in and observed the lesson. And in the post-observation conference, we took a look at actual student work. It's less clear on this screen than that one, but this is actual result from the lesson. And here, the child is having much difficulty. And the teacher wrote, if you can see closely, it says with support. And then the student got a little better at it. Phase 3 got much better at it, and then finally figured out the fact families in the 4th phase of that lesson. So as the teacher and I are in step 4, we're on the rubric with the student performed. We said this student was at a 2. They're approaching proficiency. They're not at needing a lot of support. They're really not doing this frequently on a regular basis. So this child is at a 2. Now we have a conversation about what do we need to do to help this child get from 2 to 3. Like if we're an athlete and we're working on the field, what are those skills that that athlete needs to work on to improve from here to here? And some repetition, some support work, and then most of the time the child will move on. That's where this child is. But we do that for every single child in the classroom. So that's where the rubber meets the road, in a sense, for the strategic coherence plan in lesson design. Our second goal this year is to design learning walks. These are children out in the back of JFK in the woods, and you can see closely, they have their clipboards in their hands, and they're on a learning walk. Well, a few years ago when we started the design of the SCP, the administrators and liaisons, we all practiced using the UCLA model. And the teachers this year desired to start running them on their own. The one key aspect that they mentioned was, we do not want you, Frank, in this at all. Because once an administrator walks into a room, they tend to see it becomes evaluative, right? So they wanted to have a process designed all on their own. And this is a form we would use under the SCP. What does critical thinking look like in a classroom? Here are the attributes. I've seen, I heard students. These are questions I have. These are just the tools we use in the learning walk. So we started to design our process this year about how that would work without administrative overview in this. And the teachers were coming up with ideas, but knowing that we have a lot of communication, Ms. Gosh and I were having a conversation, and K-12 liaisons were meeting, and guess what they were doing? Same thing. So what we decided to do was, instead of having 2 separate processes that teachers were creating, we're going to meet together to make one process that we can all use and maybe create that district-wide. So that's an ongoing piece. Our third goal is around student data. And one of the things we are trying to do is, how do we individualize the learning process? Over the years, we've been using the STAR reading and math. And that's a screener we use and benchmark children 3 times a year, in the fall, winter, and spring, and we look at their progress. We have 2 groups that analyze the data. One is called our data-driven instructional group. That looks at the macro, what's happening on the grade level, and then we have meetings with each individual homeroom teacher where administrators meet with the teacher and look at each child. I did this at CV Star when I was there. I was not able to put that in play right away at JFK, as I was getting to learn the culture there, but also we had a little project going on where we were doing some kinds of additions and things, which really consumed us. But last year started moving in with those meetings with teachers and looking at every single child. Well, who are those children who are accelerating, and what do they need? Who are those children in the middle, and what do they need? And who are the supports for the child that are struggling, and what do they need? Not just in school, but out of school. What's causing this child to have a difficult time? parents are splitting up. That's a factor. We need support for them. How can we get the child emotional support too? So when I came to JFK, we had the old conference room, and we used to put up all these papers on the wall with all the children, and we would code them and look at them, and that's how we were organizing our data at that point. Since then, we've become very good at using Alpine K-12, and this is a repository for all the student data that travels with the child K-12. And right now, we're generating more reports, which you can see better on that screen over there, and where the children fall. These bars on the graph are live. So once you click a bar, it'll show all the children that are in that section. And that we can break down the data much better in many different components. The question we have moving forward, though, is how does that translate into state assessments and things like that as the children move from second grade onto the state assessments, which are 3 to 8. Now I'm going to give you a little flavor. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to the board. Hope you get a flavor of what's happening at JFK. We're having a lot of fun learning, and we're just trying to create a wonderful environment for our kindergarten, first, and second graders. Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present tonight. It will be hard to beat the waffles of JFK, but we are grateful for the opportunity and also proud to show you some of the great work that our students have done, some of which were also in the JFK presentation as well. So I'm Liz Kennedy, Director of People Personnel Services. This is Sarah Knotts, our Assistant Director of People Personnel Services at the secondary level for Wells and the high school. And Mr. Paul Stalachi, who's our Assistant Director of PPS at the preschool and also elementary level, including JFK and CV Star. There are also 3 other very key members of our team here today who are very instrumental in the work that we do throughout the district. They are Nicole Gomez-Arocho, who is our bilingual school psychologist and also CSE chair, Allison Summer, who is our behavior consultant, and Dina Kinsinger, who's our CSE chair district-wide. So we all work very closely together, and we are thrilled to be able to show you what our goals are this year.
All right. So as I was introduced, I'm Paul Stalachi, I'm the Assistant Director at the elementary level. And my favorite thing about the Brewster District, just to play off Frank's, is that he gave us an opportunity to see the kids. Because honestly, that's really what softens up all this work. Is you see the look on their faces, you see what's important to them, and that's what we're here to support. Just to contextualize a little bit, you've seen presentations from the building level. We're presenting from the district-wide perspective. So we're in all the buildings, and we see kids develop from, before they enter kindergarten to exiting at the latest at 21. So this year, with our goals, I'll be speaking to you on our first goal, and that goal specifically targets the support in social emotional learning with our students K-12. So just to start off kind of soft with a little bit quote, this is just connecting healthy kids with successful outcomes. I think you take away the simple stuff when you hear quotes like this, and that's one of the larger aims and objectives that we're after. Healthy kids, successful outcomes. Why are we choosing to target work within the field of social emotional learning, social emotional development? A little bit of background for you. First one's on the heavier side. 1 in 4 children experience a traumatic event before the age of 16. That kind of hits you hard, You do a count in this room, 25%, possibly have been exposed to a traumatic experience. Big things, violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse, substance abuse, neglect, tragic events, heavy stuff. This affects our kids physiologically, how they come to school, how they feel inside, as well as psychologically, how they think, how they're able to function from a cognitive perspective when they're here at school, when they're getting on the bus, when they're waking up in the morning, when they're going to sleep at night. If you don't fall into this first bullet category where you need social emotional learning and development because you've experienced something heavy, then you definitely fall into the second one. All our students, to develop healthy lifestyles, need to know how to cope and deal with their emotions, how to self-regulate and manage. So we consider this the soft skills. We talk about that a lot within the 21st century scope of learning. And what we're doing within our district, K-12, is we're tapping into resources like RULER. We see some of the language here. RULER is an acronym for Recognizing, Understanding, Labeling, Expressing, Regulating Emotions. We're working with collaboratives. The acronym's CASEL, that's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And again, it's getting after all these soft skills. How does that integrate into our instruction? How does that integrate into some of the trainings and PD that we provide here in the district? So a little bit of background, that's the why, and the how in our work. As Frank tied in, we have a strategic plan that we've been pursuing now for several years. One of those extensions that came later in the SCP was the integration of social and emotional development. How does that intersect with those 5 skills that you see up there for the 21st century learner? So the work that we've been doing, the work that we're continuing to pursue and refine from a PPS department role within the buildings, working with our building administrators, with our students, with our teacher teams and staff, is we're targeting things at the district level, our PD days. Our assistant superintendent has supported us with inquiry strands that touch base on social emotional learning as well as a variety of other topics to put teachers and staff in contact with good information that develops their skill sets. So we keep a focus lens on professional development at the district level. At the building level, we're continuing to work with each building's respective support teams, their PBIS system that they have developed specific to their own buildings, for example. And then lastly, it's the training at the individual level, seeing where people, whether you're a one-to-one aide with a child, whether you're a classroom teacher, a special ed teacher, related service provider, where you are struggling to develop rapport and relationship and skills with a child. And our department is intersecting with that kind of skill training work and being able to push in and provide that direct support as well. So we're approaching this goal, on those 3 levels: district, building, and at the individual classroom level. Before I close out and move into our second goal, I'm going to leave you with this particular quote here. I think this quote is, wonderful for really kind of showing how the work that we do, like we do this work in social emotional learning, and it all boils down in my opinion, our opinion, to relationships. We want kids to develop healthy, strong relationships with the people around them, with their peers, with their teachers, with their families, and it is really the foundational building block for success and development. So I think this quote serves, as a point of resonance, but also an overarching, aim for the work that we're doing with social emotional learning, social emotional development. So what I'll do now is we'll transition into our second goal. I'll share the presentation over to Sarah Knotts.
Hi everyone. As introduced, I'm Sarah Knotts. I'm the Assistant Director of PPS at the secondary level. And our second goal is to promote improved access to general education through a tiered support model. So effectively that just means that we are evaluating and maximizing the supports that are in the classroom prior to a referral to the CSE. Why are we doing this? The purpose is to provide a clearly delineated model of pre-referral supports so that staff and parents know what is available, what interventions are appropriate for specific student needs, and how to increase support when needed. We will do this through reviewing our evidence-based programs and practices, clarifying how we implement such programs and practices as interventions, and providing guidance for measuring outcomes. We will identify and describe intervention resources and instructional methodologies. We will coach instructional staff on implementing tiered interventions, and we will be able to explain to families the supports that are available and the trajectory of increasing supports if a student continues to struggle. So we presently have MTSS at both the high school and the middle school. The idea here is just to further articulate the supports that are available and to strengthen the ability of students to access the general education curriculum through the supports that we already have prior to a referral to the Committee on Special Education.
All right, and so
that leads into our third goal, which is to promote the least restrictive environment, which is a phrase that we might often have heard before with respect to special education matters, and it does tie into what was just discussed about MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of supports. This applies to students in and outside of special education. The least restrictive environment is not a place, but is a principle that guides program and placement decisions for students. It is required of all public school districts as part of the Federal Individual Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which states that students with disabilities should have the amount of learning and instructional time available to them maximized in the presence of their non-disabled peers. And so least restrictive environment, LRE, is different for every individual child based on their ability levels. And so that brings us to the discussion of why LRE is important and why we are focusing on that this year as one of our key goals. So there's a lot of reasons why, and these are in conjunction and in addition to the legal and ethical obligations that we have as educators. We do have legal obligations through the New York State Part 200 regulations. There's also the federal regulations that I just mentioned. But overall, looking at an individual child's needs and working to ensure that they are receiving supports within the least restrictive environment supports their best interest and ensures opportunities as much as possible for students to be able to access their education and learn within their homeschool setting. And it also promotes independence. And again, I stress that this is always made on an individual basis given the student's individual needs. So what might look like a light level of support for one student may be the least restrictive environment for them, whereas a more intensive level of support for another student given their ability levels would be the least restrictive environment for them. So focusing on this helps us to facilitate successful transitions between grade levels, between buildings, and also by focusing on this, we are also supporting students as they transition out of the Brewster schools because we want them to be successful as adults and to be as independent as possible. And also to learn and to be able to execute the 21st century skills that are emphasized through our strategic coherence plan and also present within the profile of the graduate that we have here at Brewster. So by focusing on maximizing the options that we have along with least restrictive environment, we work to embrace the diversity and the ability levels of all students. We are committed to the belief that every student has great potential, and our mission as a department and as a district is to ensure equitable opportunities for students of all abilities. And we definitely subscribe to the belief that a community that excludes one of its members is no community at all. So we're very committed to working to ensure equitable opportunities for all students, students who receive special education services and also those who don't. And so this is a visual that shows, while these two words are similar, what some of the differences are. And our goal with everything that we do is to promote equitable opportunities. And so how do we do this? We look at the holistic district-wide picture. We also look at what each individual child needs. And we create plans accordingly. We work at every level to help students identify goals for the future and persevere to achieve them. With respect to students who are receiving much more intensive supports by attending program placements that are located outside of district, we are closely monitoring their progress, maintaining relationships with their parents, and also the district placements to develop plans for re-entry to the district when it's appropriate. And in our collaboration with the buildings, with district administration and others, we are always looking at ways to build program options that increase the continuum of services and help the building schedule efforts in a way that students are able to access the LRE. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, the three of us administrators are all working very hard to achieve these goals, and we are able to do it with the collaboration and teamwork that we have from our three new district-wide PPS team members. So as I mentioned, this is Nicole Gomez-Arocho, is our bilingual school psychologist district-wide, and is also chairing CSE meetings. Allison Summer is supporting our students with behavioral needs, and especially those who require behavior intervention plan. And Dina Hinsinger is also a CSE chairperson district-wide and is especially helpful to us this year with looking at our students who are placed at a district and helping us to figure out ways that we might be able to explore within district placements. We're always very proud of our students and our teachers. They do tremendous work at all levels. This is one picture from our high school career skills class, which decorated Ms. Knotts and Mr. Salachi's office so nicely. We also, at the high school, have a peer mentoring program where some of our students go into the career skills class and are supporting them in different ways. We're always looking at helping our students reach the milestone of graduation, and our faculty has been so incredibly dedicated towards helping our students at all levels to get there. Over the summer, we like to have our therapy dogs in, and this is one example of one of the fun days that we had. And going back to our work with JFK, in collaboration with JFK, our high school interns have been matching up with our young students at JFK and have had a peer mentoring experience there as well. So that's been very valuable, and I know it's something that the teachers and the students alike are all very happy to be engaged with right now. We thank you for your support, and before I finish up, I will mention that we also have a special education PTA meeting tomorrow night at 6:30 at CV Star. We will be talking about supporting all students during the holidays and over the break and unstructured times. So we welcome you to attend, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
That was really great. Thank you for everyone who presented this evening. We move on to our second presentation. Not as exciting, but the 2021 Building Condition Survey and JFK HVAC Project Group. Mr. Carl.
So I'm joined tonight by Glenn Fryer, our new Director of Facilities. Glenn's been in the district for about a month and a half, but he certainly made his presence felt, visiting each building and introducing himself. So I just want to thank Glenn for that. So I was here about a month and a half ago presenting our long-range financial plan, at which point we talked about long-range capital planning. And one way to do that is through a building condition survey. So the state requires this of every school district every 5 years. At the time, I had mentioned I hoped that the district would be selected, although I doubted that we would, given the fact that we just completed $39 million worth of construction district-wide over the past 4 years. We had just been notified recently that Brewster has been selected for a building condition survey in 2021, which is a good thing. So it's really good. Again, it allows us to kind of reset and refocus our attention on our facilities. Going through a $39 million project, you're really tunnel vision into what you're doing at the time. Having a building condition survey allows us to really reset and refocus. So it's certainly a good thing for the district that we're going to be doing this in 2021. Our goal is to have the field work completed by August 31st and have a report provided to the district no later than September 30th. So with that, what we'll do is we will issue an RFP, a request for proposal, from architectural firms to perform the building condition survey. I've already reached out to my colleagues throughout the lower Hudson Valley to request their feedback on their architects and who's using who, to get an idea of who's, who they would recommend for us. It is not my recommendation that we extend an invitation to our current architects. I think it's important that at this point in time we get a fresh look from an outside perspective on our facilities. I further recommend that the board consider establishing a facilities committee to review the building condition survey when it's available to us next fall. And that facilities committee should also be continued throughout the year and throughout the years to review the progress of all of those recommendations that will come through in the building condition survey. So you'll see on the agenda for this evening, unfortunately, a recommendation to reject the bids for the JFK HVAC project. It's very unfortunate, but the bids came in significantly higher than the project budget that was established just a year ago in concert with KG, the architects, and Worley Gallagher, the mechanical engineers. You'll see that the bids were significantly higher than the project budget. I believe our project budget was $2 million, of which the construction value was $1.6 million. The lowest bid for the HVAC came in at about $3.2 million. So double, literally double the construction value that had been established just a year ago. So we're obviously very disappointed in that. Again, reaching out to my colleagues throughout the region, I learned that we're not the only district in this position. Down in Rhinebeck, they are rejecting bids, or they have just rejected bids also for an HVAC project that came in excessively high. Henhud as well, Bronxville, and Pelham Schools is really struggling. They have a huge referendum to replace an entire school building, one of their elementary schools. And we're all experiencing the same thing, recognizing that the construction market has really improved. We've also heard that the cost of steel has gone up significantly, which is leading to increased trade proposals in our bids. So again, it's unfortunate. We're not the only ones in the same position. So again, unfortunately, it appears that the JFK HVAC project must be put on hold until after we complete the building condition surveys, is my recommendation. Again, it'll allow us to evaluate all of our facilities needs and then come back to the board with the input of the facilities committee and make recommendations for prioritizing future work to be performed. So what happens to the money that was set aside for this project? Because back in May of 2019, we'd asked the community to support the transfer of funds into the capital fund to perform this work. Well, that money is now set in the capital fund and cannot be used for any other purpose unless expressly authorized by the voters. So in order to use that money, or even to return it back to the general fund, it would require a separate referendum vote asking the voters to approve that. So that money is set there and cannot be used until authorized by the voters. So what our options are for the future, what we could do is we could request an additional authorization of another $2 million to perform the work. However, that would nearly deplete our entire unreserved fund balance, and I would not recommend that we do that. I think we recognize the value of our fund balance and protecting the district from the unexpected. We could also subsequently, as I mentioned, request an authorization from the voters to repurpose those proceeds into a future capital reserve. And again, that would likely happen after the building condition survey is performed, is reviewed by the facilities committee. Individual projects are then prioritized, and then a recommendation would then be made to the board. And then ultimately, again, it needs to be passed by the voters of the district what to do with those proceeds. So it's certainly not news that I wanted to deliver. We were very disappointed when we opened the bids and saw the results. But again, it's not uncommon, unfortunately, and the construction industry is doing very well, which led to that.
Victor,
that
can I
result.
ask you 2 questions on
Sure.
this? One, a third option, like you just leaving it there, because if after this whole process is decided that JFK is
Certainly.
still the #1 thing, then that money would just go to
Absolutely.
that.
Yes.
Second thing, being that all these districts are kind of facing the same, in the same boat, is it an option to possibly go out to bid again? Maybe things with the market will change with things and still get the job done?
So some of the districts, what they're doing is they're reducing the scope of work to be performed. When you do that, you're getting, maybe half of the building complete for 2/3 of the price. So over the course of time, from an economical standpoint, you're really not getting your money's worth. But that certainly is an option, and certainly something that can be considered. But really, for the money, you're not getting the value as if you were to do everything all at once, just because from the economies of scale. Other districts are going out to their public and asking them for additional authorization. Again, I don't know that the community would have the appetite for that, but I think it would be a good idea just to have our building condition survey completed before we make any decision, because then we'll have a full picture of what all of our needs are.
What's the plan for moving forward at JFK up until such time as we complete the project? We're going to keep doing the room air conditioners and sort of the patchwork sort of.
Unfortunately, at this time, that's our only option, absent a major installation of HVAC. And in speaking with Dr. Zamperlin, obviously he was very upset, about the results of this. And there's not much we can do about it at this point. The bids came in. There were five contractors who responded. And that's a very good response. All of which were significantly higher, and the lowest being, 1.6 million, higher than what was anticipated.
Well, maybe there'll be a dip.
What's that?
Maybe there'll be a dip.
We could hope so. We could hope so. So again, certainly not news that we wanted to deliver, but that was a result of the bid. And obviously, if the board has any other questions, I'd be happy to.
Victor, once the building survey comes in, then at the time you know the key components, like that is that over the years, boilers, roofs, probably the main items, maybe something towards the turf field. Is that when we could talk about a capital reserve fund and use a portion of this to set up some type of reserve fund?
Sure. And I just want to include Glenn in our response, because Glenn's been through a number of building condition surveys over the course of his career. Certainly, and I would recommend that the building condition survey be completed, because again, it gives us a full spectrum of our facility needs district-wide.
Yeah, the good thing about this is a couple of things. One, I'm kind of like a 2-year-old here. I keep saying why. I don't know anything really that much about the district, so a lot of the things that have been going in, I've been asking questions about everything. One was this, one was that. I'm driving my assistant crazy. But with doing that, and the fact that we're looking for a new architectural firm so that to perform the building condition surveys, they're going to be doing the exact same thing. There's going to be no, well, I know about that. That's a standard pack answer. Everything's going to be getting looked at basically for the first time. I've also asked my staff to start noticing things in the building. Something as simple as the little crack in the wall. Take a picture, put a ruler up against it. We'll take a look at it again in 6 months. Is it the same crack? Great, it's not a problem. Has it moved? It's something to be looked at and be addressed as we go around with the architects and look. But the whole thing behind the building condition survey, you get a very, very in-depth look of what the facilities are, aging of things, so you can get these schedules like what you're interested in so we know exactly where we're standing. Currently, I'm also applying for a NYSERDA grant it's called benchmarking. It's free to the school district. They come in, they monitor your utility costs for the past 13 months. It kind of puts you in a snapshot of where you are in comparisons. They take your square footage, the cost that it takes to run your square footage. It lets you know where you stand. Also in that, and there's been more money released by NYSERDA, they're actually helping to pay for improvements into the building. They're looking to reduce make the buildings greener as they go, because it lowers their operating costs. So, and they said free money. I said I'm there. I'm willing to take the time to spend to give them the information that we can have. This information along with the building condition survey will actually help us greatly to know where we want to go in the next 5 years or so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next thing, I really want this to be more of a discussion, because I really do need input from the board.
Let me just say this is number 3, just for the record. Or you went on? Sorry, just for the record. So it's our number 3 presentation tonight, timeline for requests for proposals.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
again, I really want this to be more of a discussion than it is a presentation, because I do need feedback from the board before we go out and issue these requests for proposals. So just as a preamble, we are required from time to time, there's no actual definite timetable, but it's just a best practice every few years or every 5 years to go out and solicit proposals for different professional services. So the focus of our controller's audit for this year was on the solicitation of proposals for professional services. One of which includes our general counsel services for legal services. So I presented to the board back in September a recommendation for a timeline for going out for RFP. The feedback at that time was an indication that we should do it sooner rather than later. So I am prepared to send out a request for proposal as soon as this Friday. But I wanted to get feedback and input from the board in terms of the ability of the board to interview the legal firms that we're requesting proposals from. So tentatively, what I put in here are before and after board meetings on Tuesday, January 28th and February 11th. Hoping to be respectful to the board, I recognize how much time you put into this job. That's a job outside of your job. That's a job outside of being a parent and homeowner and all those other things. So I am assuming the board would like to perform these interviews in an executive session piggybacked with the board meeting. The board could also consider having a separate night that's dedicated to these interviews. So again, I really just need feedback from the board, and at this point in time, not to tie anything in specifically, or you could, certainly let Ms. Gavin know of a date and time that may work for you.
So I think for that, part of it also is, the agenda. If we have a long, filled agenda, it may not end up being 8:30, so I'm almost thinking the alternate Tuesdays could work, I don't know. To commit us to. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it would be the Tuesdays preceding and preceding those two meetings. January 21st and February.
Depending what's on the calendars or whatever, but we could just, we shoot an email. We could decide that.
So
yeah.
So preference would be an independent evening for these to interview the firms.
I think so, just because this is very important,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to make sure we're not rushing through
certainly.
anyone, and that we have that time. At least that's my thought. Yeah.
All right, so tentatively I'll hold a week before that, and I can be broad. So I'll be broad, and then we can narrow it as it gets closer, I guess. Okay. So again, this is the timeline for the general counsel RFP. We're looking at a board appointment date February 25th, effective July 1st, 2020, and that's the same as we presented in September.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so firms that we should reach out to, again, reaching out to other districts in the region and the legal firms that they utilize. Keenan Bean, Sean Perelson, also Dr. Banlow suggested former law group that she's familiar with, and ultimately Thomas Drohan, the incumbent attorneys. If the board has any other recommendations that they'd like for us to send that to, we can certainly send it to more than 4. The thinking was to keep it manageable, because we're going to be interviewing each of these law firms and want to make sure that it's manageable and we're not interviewing dozens.
I did have 2 other names. I just wanted to say could very well be on this list. I just wanted to go back to my notes, just don't have them tonight, and check.
Okay.
And are we also going to post? I think we should. I agree with keeping it manageable, but at the same, they can submit a proposal and we can go to that point. But I think it'd be fair to also post it, not just reach out and ask. That's my thought. I don't know what anyone else's thought is, but.
Well, so what is the process?
So it's different from a bid, where a bid you put it out to the public and anybody can respond to it. For professional services, you're seeking their response. So it's really up to the district to determine who you're requesting service from, because you may extend it and you may get my cousin Vinny responding to you, and you really don't want to consider
Okay.
them as a law firm. But you certainly could do that, and in the past we have for other types of professional services. So it's not to say that you can't, but again, wanting to limit the respondents just to those firms that you would be comfortable with interviewing and ultimately selecting was the rationale to limit it. But again, if you have another firm that is not listed up here that that you'd like to send this to, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just check the notes from previous conversations that we
Excuse me,
had.
Victor, with these 4 firms here, they have local contacts to the area, they represent other school districts, they know
Absolutely.
the Cuba area, the Putnam.
Absolutely. Keenan Bean, Shaw & Harrelson is probably the largest law firm in the region. If you go on their website, which is embedded in this, all the links to the website are embedded in here. And they share their client list. It's Shaw & Harrelson is they probably represent the most school districts in the Lower Hudson Valley. Keenan Bean, has an extensive client list as well. And John Strohan the same.
And all 4 of those have been directly recommended by someone who you spoke to, or?
Yes, and the third, Dr. Banlow had previous experience with.
And can I just, having gone through this in my last district, it's so important, as Victor had mentioned already, that you really vet out, who you're inviting to the table is so critical to make sure that, because we went through an experience where the attorney was not the greatest attorney, so that, that made a big difference when the board started the interview process. So it's really critical, as Victor said, to really seek out reputable firms.
Okay.
All right, so again, just let me know the other firm or firms that you had available, and we can add them to the concept. Similarly, it's not required that the entire board interview the architect, but I do recommend that at least 2 to 3 board members are part of the process. So in a perfect world, we would have already established a facilities committee, and we would have charged the facilities committee with interviewing the architects. At this point, we don't have a facilities committee, so again, part of the discussion with the board is how to proceed with the selection of the architect. Recognizing the importance of this position, KG&D performed the last building condition survey, which ultimately became the $39 million bond project, which KG&D was then selected to subsequently. But in all likelihood, this firm could be, we could be working with this firm for quite a while. So I do recommend that at least 2 board members participate in the selection of the architect. And it's also consideration of the board if we should extend it to community members to participate as well. Of course, Mr. Fryer, our Director of Facilities, would be involved, and our head custodians should certainly be involved in the process because they know these buildings in and out, and they can certainly contribute to an interview process.
So, I'm sorry, when it comes to architectural services, how much, do we sign, for lack of a better term, do we sign a retainer with them and we consult with them regularly like we do with the attorneys, or do we just, when there's a project comes up, we pick the architect, we move on, how does that?
So it's not exclusive, so we're going to go out for an RFP specifically for the performance of a building condition survey. So we're going to ask them for proposals. How much will it cost to perform a building condition survey, for the Brewster Central School District based on, our school building square footage, et cetera. We're also going to ask them for rate sheets that basically say, if we come to you and we need help with a retaining wall that we need you to design or help us repair, what would the cost for that be? It's not that we're exclusive to them, but we do have them available to us through this RFP process. But again, it's not exclusive.
And how often do you think we consult with our in-house, with lack of a better term, in-house architects for projects or things that are going on? How often are we reaching out to them?
So because we've been so involved over the past, at least the 5 years that I've been here, we've probably made contact with our architects at least once a week, or if not twice a week. Obviously, during the construction, it was daily. More recently, it's been maybe once, twice a week. Glenn, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, it's, there's a lot of follow-up sessions to close out of things, so, we're always following up, that you do with it. If you're considering any modifications to the buildings over $10,000, it is required by SCD to have an architect seal on that work, so in other words, like my crew can do a lot of little things, like replacing a set of steps and things like that, but once you start getting into where you're modifying a building, adding a wall, adjusting to the ventilation system, that all needs architectural seal.
Thank you.
What does the board think about this, I guess, interview committee? Should we limit it to kind of internal, or extend it to the community and then have it be kind of the foundation of, because ultimately we're gonna need this facilities committee. So if this group becomes the core of what we're gonna need in, a year from now, to call upon people who are part of this process now to continue to work then. So it's really a question, because obviously internally we interview and we're gonna show up, but do we wanna extend it to the community at this time, or wait till after the interview process firms selected and then when their actual committees?
And just for perspective, in some districts, it's the board, and it's the full board that interviews the architect. In other districts, they defer to facilities committee, so it's really, whatever the prerogative of the board is to go through this process in Brewster.
Do we have time to put community members onto a committee before we?
To make a request and get a response and.
Well, we're planning for a board appointment date in March, so I think that gives us more than enough time if it was the board prerogative to invite community members to participate on the interview committee. In all likelihood, the interview process would take place late February, early March, so it certainly gives the board enough time if that's, if that's the prerogative of the board.
The only reason I think for this one, it would make sense to do a committee of that kind is because it's our, the tax dollars pay for the facilities and the upgrades and that whole process, and to have kind of a say in that, I think is important.
This is a long-term thing, so the more community involvement, the better. People might come and go, but the community's going to be over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's going to be their facility, so they should have a say on what goes on.
I wouldn't have the slightest idea what to ask in an interview.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with community members participating, but to me, this seems like those community members should have some knowledge of, architecture, because none of us obviously is an architect, but we have Mr. Fryer and others that we, who are experienced, that we can rely on, so I think.
Can we post it that way, maybe when,
And I'm
we
sure
send
there
out
are
requests
people.
like that for committee who have,
And it just seems like it would be more helpful to have people who have experience in the area. And I don't think it should be like a huge number of people.
not the two
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
who have a background.
I mean, if
Right.
possible.
And
If
Architecture
there would
or
be
construction
no
or
one
something.
has that.
And especially for
but
a
others want
committee
to
approach, because again, I do recommend that at least 2 board members serve on that. So in terms of a committee interview, it's certainly more manageable if there were to be 2 community members, 2 board members, and then of course, staff members that are serving on the interview committee.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so I'll put out through a backpack a solicitation for committee members, and then I'll present that to the board and allow you to choose,
with some background
the
and
2 to.
some, right, and infrastructure.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And so lastly, again, in my conversations with my colleagues, Ricci are getting consensus on some of the architects who they're working with. KSQ is probably the most prominent architecture firm currently throughout the region. Clark Patterson Lee we had interviewed back in December of 2014 before we ultimately chose KG&D for the $39 million bond. We were very impressed with Clark Patterson Lee, and I think that they're currently architects for Pleasantville. H2M and Fuller and D'Angelo are also 2 well-known firms that work in the region. So the last 2 here are really more informational, but I just wanted the board and the community aware that we were going out for RFP for bond counsel. We currently work with Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood. There are very few bond counsel firms actually throughout the state, and these are the three that were recommended to us. We're certainly satisfied with Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood. However, we do have a very large bond that we're going to be issuing in July, so we certainly want all of our professional service providers to sharpen their pencils and get us the best rates possible. We plan on going through this process with the Finance Committee, so it certainly doesn't require the same scrutiny as a full-on board committee, but we'll review those proposals, we'll provide them to the Finance Committee and get feedback before making an award. Similarly, Fiscal Advisors, we currently work with Capital Markets Advisors. There are very few players in this game throughout the state. Fiscal Advisors we're very familiar with, and I believe the district had worked with them many years ago, and then Municipal Solutions, Inc. Again, we'll go through this process with the Finance Committee and share those proposals with them for ultimately determining the contractors, or I should say the service providers to award.
That sounds silly, but what does a fiscal advisor service do?
So they're the ones who go out to the bond market, and they are the ones who request bids whenever we issue a bond. They're the ones who also will calculate, the net interest cost of a bond to identify which bank we should ultimately award a bond to. They do a lot in terms of the pre-capital project planning in looking at our building aid, and timing and designing the schedule of bonds so that they match with building aid. So they do a lot of work, pre-bond and post-bond.
They would also do, the bond anticipation note? Lead up, or is that?
Yes, they're also included in that process as well, as is bond counsel. Okay, thank you for your help in that.
So we move on to action items, but first, if anyone has any public remarks that they'd like to make specific and only to any of the action items on the agenda, there'll be another opportunity later for additional comments, but right now just for agenda action items. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, in case you don't know me, I'm Kristen Zokwa. I am action item number 5, approval of budget advisory committee member charter and members. I was asked at the end of last year to join the budget committee. I was not approached this year. You solicit volunteers through eBackpack, and because I don't have a child in the school district, I'm never notified. And so I was not asked, and I was also the one that publicly supported the budget and spoke at the budget meetings along with Scott, and also supported you guys on social media for the budget last year. So that's what I have to say about that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. We'll move on to action items now. Number 1 is rejection of bids for JFK HVAC installation project.
Yes, as I mentioned, we were very disappointed to open the bids for the HVAC project. We're recommending that the board reject all bids.
Thank you. I need a motion and a second, please. Krista and Scott, thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
So for right now, the funds just sit where they are?
Correct.
Okay.
Seeing no other comments, all those in favor?
I'm just going to abstain only because one of them is a client of mine.
Okay, so those in favor, 5, opposed, 0, and 1 abstention. Motion passes 5-0.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's okay. Action item number 2, approval of tax receivers reports and tax collection reassignment.
Yes, this is a procedural resolution each year on November 1st. Putnam County takes over the collection process from the towns of Patterson and Southeast for collection of unpaid taxes.
Thank you. I need a motion and a second, please. Eric and Glenn, thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 3, approval of tax refunds and budget amendment number 3.
Yes, these are tax cert refunds that have been reviewed by our treasurer and our attorneys and are being recommended for payment.
Thank you. Motion and second, please. Carrie and Krista, thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 4, approval of contracts for transportation services. A, Southern Westchester BOCES. B, North Salem Central School District, Somer Central School District, and Yorktown Central School District shared hockey team.
So the first item, Southern Westchester BOCES, we have students who are placed in Southern Westchester BOCES attending classes at 2 different sites, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. BOCES provides that transportation on our behalf and then bills the district. The second item is in relation to our shared hockey team that allows us to share transportation as well.
Thank you. A motion and a second, please. Glenn and Carrie, thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 5, approval of budget advisory committee charter and members.
Yes, so this was tabled from the November 26th meeting. A community member reached out to us subsequently and requested that they be added to the committee. We had not had an opportunity to update the agenda to add that person, Francine Santos, to the agenda. So we tabled the Budget Advisory Committee charter and membership at that point. It could be tabled again if that's the will of the board. Just saying.
Would it be possible to ask Christine if she would like to?
Wait. I need a motion first and a second. So Eric and Glenn, thank you. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Scott.
Could we ask Christine if she would like to join?
Of course I want to be on the committee. Why would I stand up if I didn't want to be on the committee?
You like to make trouble.
So the messier way, but we can do it tonight. I just need to, I need a motion and a second to amend this action item to include the name and update it publicly. We can then just still take care of it tonight. So, yes?
Yeah.
Thoughts on it? Okay, so I need a motion to amend action item number 5 to include Christine Zirkelbeck as a member for this committee, and a second. So Krista and Carrie, thank you. All those in favor of the amendment? Motion passes 6-0. So that's for to amend it. I still need to now vote on it. So you got all that, yes? Okay.
Right, thank you.
Oh, no, we haven't voted for it yet.
Oh. Thank you for getting this far.
So now we have an amended action item, which will, as Susan's updating the record, include Ms. Zirkelbeck's name. So we can now take a motion in a second to approve the amendment, the action item as amended. So I need a motion. Eric, thank you, and Glenn, second, thank you. All those in favor of the amended action item. 6-0, the motion passes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know, it's so hard to find good volunteers. Don't throw me away.
So, okay, we now move on to action item number 6, acceptance of donation from BEF for instructional grants.
Yeah, so we are so fortunate to have the Brewster Education Foundation support our students and staff each year with a round of grants, and this round is being recommended for approval by the board, and again, we thank the BEF for their support.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion and a second, please. Carrie and Glenn, thank you. Questions or comments on this? Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 7, approval of addendum to school resource officer SRO agreement with Putnam County. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so Putnam County had a change in staffing at Wells Middle School. We have a new SRO at Wells Middle School, and the addendum to the contract represents the difference of the 2 officers' salaries and benefits, it amounts to just an $1,800 change over the course of the entire year.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion and a second, please. Scott and Eric, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Okay. Action item number 8, acceptance of donation, Lrv Restaurant for E&L Parent Night.
Yes, we'd like to thank Mr. Esteban Jimenez and Mr. Jorge Galindo of La Guadalupana Restaurant for their very generous donation of delicious food for our E&L Parent Night on November 20th. We fed dozens of people, but more importantly, it was an important homeschool connection that was established. So in addition to Mr. Jimenez and Mr. Galindo, I'd also like to thank our E&L specialist, Mrs. Alicia Manguso, who's wonderful. She coordinated the entire event, and it was a great start to the school year.
Thank you. I just need a motion and a second. Carrie and Glenn, thank you. Questions or comments? Once again, thank you. All those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 9, approval of policies. Second read, 5660, food service management, meal charge and prohibition against meal shaming, free and reduced price food services. 5710, student transportation. 7440, student voter registration and pre-registration. 7510, student health services. 7522, concussion guidelines and procedures.
Easy for you to say. Submit these policies for your second read review after being recommended by the policy committee and receiving no further feedback from the community after the first read was approved at the last board meeting.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion and a second, please. Scott and Eric, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 10, resolution to approve the terms and conditions of employment for Assistant Supervisor of Transportation.
Yes, this action item reflects the conditions of employment, including salary and benefits for the Assistant Supervisor of Transportation, position that was recently vacated by Ms. Volpe. The board will note that this position is outside any collective bargaining unit, but its terms and conditions, including benefits, are in line with both our union and non-union employees. Again, the individual being recommended for this vacancy is noted on the consent agenda, and I'll share some brief background when we get to that question.
Thank you. A motion and a second, please. Scott and Carrie, thank you. Questions or comments?
Is this an internal hire, or did this go out to?
This is through a process and an individual outside of the community.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 11, approval of range for non-union personnel salary increases.
Yes, so this action item simply gives the board the authority to grant raises within the recommended range based on each individual's performance review. The suggested range is aligned with last year's recommendation and lower than the prior year in 17-18.
Thank you. A motion and a second, please. Glenn and Krista, thank you. Questions or comments?
Is it feasible to try to keep it within the 2% cap, or this is just what the market's placing at 2.5%?
Mr. Carlson, do you want to weigh in?
Well, I would say that it's probably below some of the step increases included in our collective bargaining agreements, and it's reflective of probably the past several years of what's been authorized by the board. I believe Mr. Harrington and I looked into it for the past several years, where the high authorization was at 2.9%, and then for the past, or I think this year, the recommendation is to drop it down to 2.5%, but that is consistent with other collective bargaining agreements and also with our history here.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? 6, opposed, 0, motion passes 6-0. Okay, move on to the consent agenda. Do you want to?
Sure. The board may note the recommendation to appoint Mr. Nathaniel Spence to the position of Assistant Supervisor of Transportation effective January 2nd, 2020. Unfortunately, Mr. Spence was unable to attend this evening, but he does come to Brewster with more than 12 years of transportation experience. He's worked in school districts largely serving Orange County. Beginning as a driver, Mr. Spence was promoted to roles as safety inspector, dispatcher, transportation operations assistant. His understanding of safety regulations and the subsequent need to establish a culture of safety within transportation was particularly impressive during the interview process. Most recently, Mr. Spence has worked as his own independent consultant, contracting with schools and organizations throughout New York State to promote extensive training and workshops on driver safety. So the committee was overwhelmingly impressed with his knowledge, experience, and approachability, and as such, it's my pleasure to recommend him on this evening's consent agenda for your approval.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion and a second, please. Eric and Scott, thank you. Questions or comments on the consent agenda?
Just quickly, Mr. Harrington, I see we have 3 interpreters listed on the personnel agenda. How often, can you kind of give some background? I don't know that I've ever seen that on the consent agenda before.
So that noted per hour salary is per the contract. So the need often arises during evening parent-teacher conferences or after school day.
Yes, exactly.
So that's not a full-time position. That's an as-needed sort of position that we bring those people in. Okay.
Exactly, and these are employees presently in the district who are bilingual.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm showing up on it again, so I'm going to accuse myself.
The same for the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
You can just, we can. Do you see them? You can always, we have enough people, but you can always just, we can always amend it for you to approve the rest of your own. So let's make sure.
No,
Okay. That was last agenda you were on.
Yeah. Are you taking on another team?
I'm not, no more. I'm fine.
No, okay. Triple check. And anybody accusing you of whatever.
Okay, I'll vote twice.
Just checking it again. No, okay, yeah. You're putting yourself out there again, you just don't know it for more. It's fine. Okay, so you're good. So we have a motion and a second for discussion. Anyone else? Comments or questions? No one? Okay. All those in favor of the consent agenda? 6 opposed, 0. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Now we move on to public remarks. This can be on any topic. Just in case, I just want to give a little outline. You have 3 minutes. Please address the board. There has been some talk in the community about an employee matter, so if anyone is here to speak on that matter, you're welcome to do so. But please refrain from using any student names or employee names, as that is prohibited in this environment as it's a public forum. You're always welcome to email the board. And also, please understand that the board, you can ask some questions or you may have comments, but on any matters like these, we cannot reply to that as it is all confidential, but you are welcome to make any comment. Okay, so with that said, does anyone have anything to say? The floor is yours. Please come up, state your name.
My name is Jessica Tierney. I'm a senior at Brewster High School. I didn't know that I couldn't say the name.
You can just say
I'll say teacher. The first day of my junior year was the first time I met this English teacher. And on that day, I was an aspiring photographer with a dream and a lot of anxiety issues. Both of these topics showed up in my English work. Soon after, that teacher asked me to join the newspaper, and since then I've been paid by teachers to photograph events. I took photos for the high school yearbook and the middle school yearbook, and I'm also a reporter in the newspaper too. Being a photographer is hard. Being a photographer with anxiety felt close to impossible at times, but that teacher saw potential in me and worked with me. He wouldn't let my self-doubt or my anxiety smother my passion or talent. He would give me challenges with my newspaper assignments. He'd say to take photos of students I've never talked to before. This was terrifying to me at first, but I knew he believed in me and I managed to get it all done, and I felt accomplished in myself. The students of Brewster High School need that teacher. He sees the best in students and goes above and beyond to bring the best out of them and show them how proud of themselves that they should be. Before junior year, I would walk on the roads near my house taking photos of whatever caught my eye, but when cars drove by, I'd be too anxious to take the photo. I was too scared to take photos in front of people. At the end of my junior year, I went to the graduation, and I ran around in front of all those people, the whole school plus their families, and I took photos of the graduation for the newspaper. That teacher has been more than teacher. He's been my mentor too, and not just to me, to a bunch of other students. We sent a couple of emails that you received, I know. He taught me so much more than just how to write essays. He goes above and beyond, and to see him in comparison to other teachers who do the bare minimum, and to see him have his job on the line, that's upsetting to me and a lot of other students. And I thought that should be said. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Teacher in question assisted that young lady with her ability to stand before you and speak with her anxiety problems. And I think that in itself speaks volumes. And that's what I have to say about the teacher in question. Thank you.
Any other comments this evening?
One moment. It's a little different. I just want to wish everyone happy holidays and a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
You too, Connie. Let's hope.
Anyone else? Okay, we will close public remarks. So summary of emails, as I mentioned earlier, we did receive 8 specific emails on this employee matter, and I just do want to say thank you to those who reached out to the board. They've been reviewed, and as always, we do welcome community members to reach out to us, and we've heard what you said, and we're appreciative, so thank you. Now we've gone to board remarks and committee updates. So what have we been doing? Anything in the past 2 weeks? It's been 2 weeks? A couple more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, a couple items. I just wanted to bring up, back last month, Deputy Kreisky did have a safety procedure presentation with the PTA at the high school. There was a lot of great information. It really helps you to realize what's going on. And compared to when I went to Rochester, what we've done here in Brewster are above and beyond, and I believe that the deputy would know as well that when he goes to these meetings, he sees what other districts are handling, and we are way beyond it. We have a lot of procedures and things in place that sort of put us above the curve when it comes to the safety of the students, and I appreciate that effort. Last week I attended the Advocacy 101 meeting where our local NISBAs and the student representations get together to let us know how they're working on talking to our state representatives, what they're pushing, and how they should help us push. They brought on the superintendent of Ossining, and he brought up a number of great items he's working with, and it's all in line with dealing personal relationships. Little items like even just taking the student newspaper and mailing it to all our representatives, following them on Twitter, liking what they do, and if they do something that supports the school, not necessarily ours, but the school in general, to retweet it, to let them know that we see them and we appreciate what they're doing, and to don't just invite them in and shake them down. Let them know what's going on. Bring them in, show them what's going on, so they see what's going on. Related to that, I would like to get the board's feeling on reaching back out to Senator Harkam. Last year, he put a bill in where he had requested additional funding for Ossining, Peekskill, and Brewster. I think Brewster was $1 million. It just never made its way through the assembly. And every year they have to reapply their bills. So I would like to see if we can reach out to him again, saying we appreciate his effort, what he's done on our behalf, and would he please, repeat what he's done for us and, continue on. So especially in a tight year, maybe there's possible funding for $1 million or other funds that he can come up with.
So we have done that in the past, and I think if we could set that up again, we created a roundtable with, the different elected officials, with staff and students as well, and some board members, and just kind of had a little agenda, and also show them around the district. So I think it'd be great if we could set that up and bring them in and show them what their efforts and become more personal for them. I agree. Yes, if we can do that.
And I think it's a great idea to send them the newspaper. I mean, the newspaper is so well done. It should be shared, I'm sure there's other people within Brewster to share it with, or, I don't know if people can ask to receive it, but it really is so well done. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, because Senator Harkam, Assemblyman Byrne, our local county representatives, Mr. Castellano, Mr. Yonke, any of these people, even the county executives, let them know so they see. And we're on their forefront, and when they're thinking of something like, oh, Brewster would appreciate that, oh, Brewster just did that. The more they talk about us, the more they know about us, the more that will get done, just by keeping the contact.
Absolutely. Yes.
This Saturday, I believe it's the wrestling team is doing a pancake breakfast at Applebee's. As mentioned before, there's a SEPTA meeting tomorrow at 6:30. We have our Budget 101 coming up next week. Next Saturday, the 15th, the Performing Arts is putting on their Holiday Bazaar, which was postponed due to the weather. So they're doing it again, and it's a big fundraiser, especially with them looking to raise funds, as the marching band has been invited to go to Europe to play for the Pope next year.
When
Not
is
really
that,
the
Scott?
Pope. It's the 15th. I believe it's all day long. I think it's 10 to 2 or 10 to 4, but it's at the high school. They have vendors, even at food trucks. Outside of our region, I wanted to shout out to Carmel at their loss for Lou Riolo, who has did great benefits, but now he's moving on to Putnam, Northern Westchester BOCES, where he'd not only be able to help them, he could be able to help all of us. So it's just something, it's good to see, and he is local, and we have kids in the district. And just one other item, Poor Mayapack, years ago, when they did a budget, and they did some construction, they forgot to process some paperwork. What happens in this case is you fault your aide down the road. In most cases, you just present paperwork, because they all don't have somebody like Mr. Carlson here, which keeps on top of these things. It was an error, but they did not complete it. As soon as they found the error, they paperwork, they approached Senator Harkam and the Assemblyman, and the bills were passed unanimously through the House and the Senate. Eight different bills were sent to the governor's desk. Mayapack's was vetoed.
Yeah.
No reason spoken on what was going on. I think 3 or 4 passed, and the one from Putnam was not, and some other local municipalities as well. So once again, his office will reach out, resubmit the bill, but I just wanted to let you know that this is something that has occurred, and I don't see any reason behind it, and it could be us one day. So it's just something we want to keep our eyes on.
Anyone else? Just keeping with the political piece, so every year in February, there's a Capitol conference, and we get to decide upon all the, if you've been up there, you'll see other groups lobbying for their personal causes. So this is it's February 9th and 10th, and we get to do that with other surrounding districts, and we register, and the appointments are set up for us, and we go and meet with our representatives. But it's also good to meet with other representatives, because to your point, when they're voting, even if they're not ours specifically, it takes more than one vote to pass legislation. So it's good for them to hear from many districts. So we usually have our appointments, and then we kind of walk around and see who's sitting, who's open, and we walk in their offices too. So that'll be coming up. I'll send out an email as a reminder so you can go up there for that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. not that I can think of, other than just upcoming meetings, which you've mentioned many. Our next board meeting, I think, is January 28th. I think it is. 14th? Oh, okay. And is that the only one? I think it's one in, oh, there are two. I thought there was one in January. Okay, so 14th and 20th. Other than that, I guess just have a great break. And anyone else have anything? I think we might be done. Let's see, remarks may also be emailed to the board at boe@boosterschools.org. We don't have executive sessions, so I just need a motion